Welcome to Seeds of Thought. Today I want to talk about why you keep starting but never finish. There is a kind of frustration that does not make noise. It does not always look like failure. It does not always look like falling apart. Sometimes it looks like potential. It looks like unfinished goals, half-built plans, business ideas still sitting in your notes, books you meant to write, calls you meant to make, habits you meant to keep, prayers you meant to back with action. And if we are honest, that kind of frustration can be heavier than obvious failure. Because obvious failure has closure. But unfinished things, they stay in your mind. They follow you around. They whisper to you. And after a while, you stop asking, why am I not winning? You start asking a more painful question. Why do I keep disappearing from my own life? That is what this is really about. Not laziness, not lack of intelligence, not lack of desire. Something quieter, something more dangerous. Because you are probably not bad at starting. Starting excites you. A new idea gives you energy. A new plan makes you feel clear again. A new goal feels like a new identity. For a moment, it feels like everything is about to change. But then something happens. The excitement fades. The process gets slower. The work gets repetitive. The result stops feeling immediate. And without even noticing it, you begin to pull away. You tell yourself you will come back tomorrow. Tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes next month. And another version of your life gets left unfinished. Be honest. How many things in your life are still sitting at 80%? Almost done, almost launched, almost healed, almost consistent, almost ready, almost there. That word almost can do serious damage. Because if you live in almost too long, it starts to feel normal. And when almost becomes normal, unfinished becomes identity. That is the real danger. Not that you failed once. That you practiced not finishing so many times that now your mind expects it. So let's tell the truth. The real issue is usually not that you cannot do the work. It is that finishing feels different than starting. Starting is exciting. Finishing is exposing. Starting lets you imagine success. Finishing forces you to face reality, because once something is finished, it becomes real. And real things can be judged. Real things can disappoint. Real things can reveal gaps. Real things can show you exactly where you still need to grow. So instead of finishing, many people unconsciously do something else. They restart a new idea, a new system, a new plan, a new strategy, a new routine. Why? Because new beginnings protect fantasy. As long as the dream stays unfinished, you can still tell yourself, I could have done something big. But the moment you finish, the dream has to stand on its own. That is where the fear shows up, not fear of work. Fear of the moment of truth. That is why some people are not addicted to failure. They are addicted to avoiding evaluation. They would rather stay in potential than risk being seen in process. And that pattern costs more than most people realize. Because every unfinished task sends a message. Every promise you break with yourself becomes evidence. Evidence your mind collects. Evidence that says, we do not follow through. We get inspired, but we fade. We mean well, but we do not stay. We start strong, but we do not finish well. And after enough repetitions, that evidence becomes identity. This is where the real battle begins. Because once identity gets involved, motivation is no longer enough. You can hype yourself up for a few days. You can make a new plan on Sunday night. You can say this month will be different. But if deep down you still see yourself as someone who never follows through, your behavior will eventually return to that image. That is why some people sabotage themselves right when progress becomes real. Not because they want to lose, but because their identity is trying to stay familiar. The mind loves familiarity even when familiarity is painful. That means you can want a new life and still keep repeating old patterns because those patterns feel like home. And that is why this problem goes deeper than productivity. It is not just about getting more done. It is about rebuilding trust with yourself. Because the truth is, a lot of people do not have a time problem. They have a self-trust problem. They do not trust their own word anymore. They do not trust their own momentum. Do not trust their own plans. Do not trust their own discipline. Do not trust the version of themselves that gets excited in the beginning. That is why every new goal feels heavy. Not because the goal is too big. Because part of you is already expecting disappointment. And when you live like that for too long, you stop feeling powerful even when you have potential. You start feeling divided. One side of you wants more. The other side is used to quitting. One side of you wants to build. The other side keeps escaping discomfort. One side of you can see the future. The other side keeps abandoning the process required to reach it. That inner division is exhausting. And many people call it confusion. But often it is not confusion. It is conflict. Conflict between the life you want and the habits you keep protecting. So now the question changes. Instead of asking, how do I get more motivated? Ask something better. Why do I keep leaving when the work starts becoming real? That question can change your life. Because the answer is usually found in the middle, not the beginning, not the end, the middle. That stretch where excitement fades but the reward has not shown up yet. That is where most people disappear. Not because they are weak, because the middle is quiet. No applause. No instant reward. No visible transformation. Just repetition. And repetition reveals who you really are. Anybody can look committed in the beginning, but the middle asks a harder question. Who are you when this gets boring? Who are you when nobody notices? Who are you when progress is invisible? Who are you when you have to repeat simple things without emotional reward? That is where finishers are made. Not in hype, in monotony, not in dramatic declarations, in private repetition. And this is where a lot of people lose their power, because they have trained themselves to need excitement in order to stay committed. If it feels fresh, they are in. If it feels emotionally charged, they are focused. If it feels new, they are alive. But almost everything valuable eventually becomes repetitive. Fitness becomes repetitive. Writing becomes repetitive. Healing becomes repetitive. Business becomes repetitive. Growth becomes repetitive. Discipline becomes repetitive. If you keep quitting when repetition begins, you are not escaping boredom. You are escaping transformation. That is the shift. Because now the problem is not, I need more motivation. The problem is, I have made boredom mean something it does not mean. Boredom does not always mean the thing is wrong. Sometimes it means the thing is real. Sometimes repetition is not the death of passion. Sometimes repetition is the birthplace of power. And people who change their lives learn to stay when the feelings leave. They stop measuring commitment by emotion. They start measuring it by standards. That is the difference. A person ruled by emotion says, I will do it when I feel ready. A person ruled by standards says, I do it because this is who I am. That is identity. And identity is what drives behavior when motivation disappears. So maybe the real question is not whether you can finish. Maybe the real question is, which version of you have you been practicing? The version who starts? Or the version who stays? The version who gets inspired? Or the version who gets it done? The version who protects fantasy? Or the version who can handle reality? Because every day, whether you realize it or not, you are rehearsing a self. And whatever you rehearse long enough becomes natural. That means inconsistency is not just a bad habit. It is a trained pattern, which means it can be untrained. That is the good news. You are not doomed to repeat the same cycle forever, but you do have to tell the truth about what is happening. You do not keep quitting because you are incapable. You may be quitting because finishing makes things real, and real things make you vulnerable. But here is the cost of avoiding vulnerability. You never get the reward of completion, and completion does something starting never can. Starting gives you possibility. Finishing gives you self-respect. Starting makes you feel inspired. Finishing makes you feel trustworthy. Starting fills your mind with vision. Finishing rebuilds your relationship with yourself, and that may be what you need most right now. Not another idea, not another perfect plan. Trust. The kind of trust that comes from knowing your word still means something. The kind of trust that comes from finishing what you said you would finish. The kind of trust that makes your future feel believable again. So before you move on from this, sit with one question. What in your life keeps staying unfinished because finishing would force you to face the truth? Do not answer fast, because that answer may reveal the very pattern that has been quietly slowing your whole life down. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. That is where change begins, not with hype, with awareness.